I think the future of cannabis is going to look like the industry. And I think people think that sounds weird until you break it down. But think about how is bought, right? If you go to your local store, you are buying from a variety of brands that all got delivered by the same truck that came from the same central processing facility where they pasteurized and did all of the things that require high lift, kind of steady, medium profits.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Brett Puffenbarger. Sorry, Brett, it's a long day.
Brettenbarger.
Take the time. How you doing today, Brett?
I'm doing great, man.
Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to hold the West Coast down. I think we were chatting earlier. Brett was born and raised in a small town in Virginia. Just tried and true East Coast loyalty, right, Brett? How are you?
East Coast.
I love it. We're not even going to try to have the question. Thanks for Kellen for giving in. And Brett, thank you so much for solidifying that East Coast allegiance. So Brett, for our listeners, unfamiliar, can you give a quick background about yourself and how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Oh, yeah, that's an easy one. Born and raised small town Virginia, had to get the fuck out as soon as it started. Joined the military, didn't really know what I was getting into. Joined the Marine Corps, did a couple deployments, got out. Lived a normal life until one day an ex-girlfriend long ago told me I was being a jerk and I should smoke weed because she saw it on the news that veterans did well smoking weed. So I did. Just so happened to be right around the time Florida was legalizing, like a year before maybe. I was working almost a decade at Harley Davidson in business development there, and was sold the founder of one of the original MSOs in Florida a motorcycle, got fired for failing a piss test at Harley, and called him and was like, hey, I was good enough to sell you a motorcycle. Can I sell some weed for you? So my first weed job was at an MSO, me and a dude from Disney figuring out retail rollouts. The rest is kind of history, I guess.
I love it. First off, there's not a better sales pitch than achieving a successful sale and then telling the person, listen, I can do this, when we get started. So those early days give us just a glimpse into what your role was there and how different the industry was from where it is today.
So it's actually kind of crazy. So I came in a little later than I guess a lot of people, but still decently early days. It was probably 2016. So back then it wasn't the Florida we know now. It was actually kind of chaotic in that all of the license holders were beholden to their application process, not necessarily laws, because that's how they worked it at the time. So we weren't competitive. I was calling the people at what would become Curaleaf, for the people that at what would become Truly, and be like, yo, what did you guys put for question E in this city form? How did you get a store open? That kind of shit. So mostly it was just building out retail footprint stuff, right? So coming from Harley, a lot of people don't realize they make more money selling t-shirts and leather jackets and the brand and apparel and physical goods than they do actual motorcycles. So that was something I was passionate about. Pair me with a guy from Disney who's the gods of branding and retail and suck every penny you can. It was a pretty natural fit. The weird part there, though, is fun little feather in the cap. We got the first dispensary open in the whole state. And I was like, woo, go us. We beat True Leaf by 18 hours. Literally, they open the next day. And we're like, yeah, we win. We're going to crush it. I mean, we see how that goes, right? They're kind of titans now. But it was super weird. So at the time, we couldn't sell high THC over the counter. We had to deliver it. So we had to come up with this whole thing of hey, nice lady with ALS or MS, I'm going to meet you across the street after you pay me and then come over there because I can't do it. It was so weird. So I guess it's not any different than it is now. Lots of weird laws making you do lots of weird shit, right?
I love it. Well, my first question goes to, you got started in this role, probably wasn't much of a playbook, probably a lot figured out on your own. Was there childhood stuff or from an entrepreneurial where you were always kind of focused on those elements? Because the more that we've dug into this from a cannabis entrepreneurial standpoint, there's signs early on that individuals who are thriving here, and I definitely consider you one of the people who are pushing the industry far, have done certain things in their childhood from an entrepreneurial standpoint to set themselves up to problem solve along the way.
Yeah. So growing up small town Virginia, my mom owned a flower shop for 35 years. So my very first job was making boutonnieres and corsages and stuff in the back, all hands on deck. The whole family's there for any of the major holidays because that's when you make your money there. I got kind of entrepreneurial in the weed sense in high school. So I have a cousin that lives up close to DC and she's like a year and a half younger. So I started buying cheap dirt weed at like rural prices and then driving my happy ass up to DC and selling it to all of her rich like trust fund baby friends. So I guess that counts. But honestly, like I am and will probably forever be the reluctant entrepreneur. So like between the military, like kind of building in like the like structure and like drive and like the thing, like I personally seek a mission, not a job, not a career, a mission, because that's what the military built into me, right? Like you must believe it more than anything else. So for me, working for other people is consistently a struggle for that because like I want that mission and I'll buy into somebody else's mission, but like you don't control that. So for me, it's a balancing act. And I've found a sweet spot in doing like the fractional and contract executive thing. It's not to say that I wouldn't love to find a full-time home. Like that would be dope, right? Like if the perfect thing came along, it's damn near impossible. And like candidly, I've kind of become specialized in the B2B cannabis world. Like I could do B2C all day long. Like let's talk direct to consumer or like all that stuff. But like for me, the mission became growing the influence of how many people I can help, right? Like working at a dispensary or working at a processor, you can only help the amount of people in your network. But if you go into B2B land, now you're helping companies who help people and you're helping them grow. And like that for me is like the driving force, right? Like how do I help the most people I can? Well, that's helping businesses attract other businesses because that's where the real like proliferation comes from.
What do you think some of the cannabis businesses right now are lacking from that perspective in terms of like
structure? I think a lot of people like to make the excuse of like, oh, it's cannabis, it's hard, right? Oh, how do we measure it? Oh, how do we forecast? Oh, how do we do the same way every other business does, right? Like I'm the first one to accept that we're like all cannabis is like playing on hard mode, right? I'll never forget this meme of like the toilet seat with like the piece of cardboard on it with the little hole cut. And it's like, this is expert mode. That's what cannabis is like. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It means you have to work harder, right? Like you have to be more on top of it. And I think the issue with cannabis is because, number one, I don't believe there's anything such thing as a cannabis industry. I think that's a misnomer. There's 39 of them or 40 of them or however many states there are plus the hemp market is how many cannabis industries they are because they're all siloed. They're all different. They're all, whatever. So my point being there, yeah, it's on hard mode, but like you have to be able to accept that off the rip and plan for it and measure and like do all of the things that a normal business does in spades. And I think that's what most cannabis businesses are lacking is either the structure or the true self-assessment, self-awareness that they need to be playing for keeps, right? And with it being like 39 different markets and all of that, there's a lot of success despite themselves that happen in cannabis, right? We're constantly in like a boom and a bust. And like you see it all day, every day on LinkedIn and social media where it's like this market's popping off and this one isn't. And this one, like, we'll just diversify into that one. Yeah, it's easy to chase the cash. It's hard to survive long term in these different various markets. So like for me, I think a lot of people are lacking that too. Like they don't really do that hard self-assessment when it gets hard. And then they don't know how to measure what's working and what's not to survive it.
I think that's so perfectly articulated and such a incredibly challenging dilemma that we see time and time again, that these companies, they're growing, but they know internally there's some sort of challenges they're trying to figure out. They assess some sort of KPI internally on this area, but maybe the KPI isn't accurately tracking the information they need. And there becomes this disconnect between, let's call it different parts of the supply chain or like from like the revenue side from like the inventory sales guy versus the manufacturing guy. And things just aren't aligned. So from a structure standpoint, does that require like an internal champion, like an executive to breathe that through the organization and go, I understand this is not the way we were currently doing it, but today going forward, we need to track every single input and every single detail so that we can have visibility into exactly how we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where like a strong COO comes into place. But more importantly than that, like my world, right? It's very easy to say like, well, fractional CMO. I think that title is dying, right? I don't think there are going to be a lot of CMOs anymore. I think there are going to be a lot of CROs or CGOs, right? Like Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Growth Officer. Because I think at the end of the day, one of the things that people screw up the most, and like at least within my level of expertise, is like marketing and sales butt heads, or marketing and sales do great but you don't retain the customers, like that whole like lifetime value cycle aspect. I think a strong CRO figure is necessary for that, to keep the whole rev org in check. And then if you have a strong COO, like with like proper demand planning and proper functionality, and the two of you can be a partner, like that trifecta with a good CEO that helps mediate the risks there between the two is the core trifecta. You could also replace the COO with CFOs in a lot of stances. I see that a lot in cannabis companies where it's kind of like a hybrid role there. But that, right? Like those two are the key of enforcing it down. So it all starts at the top for a lot of these things. And even for the smaller cannabis companies, right? Like, have those strong structures in place. And I think that's where like fractional executives come in, right? You can't afford the whole thing. Have that like backstop, right? So even if you're like a small solo operator or like a smaller operator, get good advisors or get good fractional executives that can buffer your stuff. And then the key piece to that is like, trust these fucking people through and through. Like they're not coming at you to criticize. They're not coming at you to like break you down. It's very much an iron sharpens iron kind of like my favorite analogy for that is, have you guys ever seen the Blue Angels after they fly? Where they like viciously rip each other apart and they're like, you were 3 inches off, Todd, like whatever. I think that's really necessary because, you know, it kind of brings us full circle to your first question of like, we're playing on hard mode, right? So like in order to survive that, rise up. Like don't take the ego out of it, take the like feelings out of it. Like, yeah, founder, it's your baby, but like a professional CRO or CFO, like good person, fractional or not, is only there to help you.
I wonder if one of the reasons we see this problem happen is that the industry tried to grow so fast, and as they were growing, they recognized there was leaks in the boat, and they were like, just throw some duct tape on and keep it moving. And then they just continued to grow the size of the boat. And then now they're looking back and they're like, all right, we got a hole here, we got a hole here, we got a hole here, but we've never plugged leaks before. We just know how to grow the boat. And now it becomes like an internal reflective period where it becomes, maybe some people feel like it becomes like an attack, but what you're saying is perfectly spot on, right? It's not an ego attack. We recognize historically you were growing and that's what you needed to do. But today the environmental conditions have changed and we need to figure out how to sustain and plug all the holes. And that means turning over every rock, looking through everything and figuring out, is there anything we can be doing better today that we should be considering? Because at the end of the day, that's really what you need to do in order to survive.
Yeah, and it goes to the sunk cost fallacy, right? I think a lot of people fall into that trap where they're like, well, we've invested this direction. Well, the second you stop is the second you stop wasting money, right? The second you stop Band-Aid and Band-Aid and Band-Aid. And like, I do think there's merit to like larger triage Band-Aids, right? Like a gauze versus a true Band-Aid for temporary things. So I won't talk about who, but recent client, right? Like they had a huge amount of historical issues and Band-Aids put into place, and it kind of just became a ball of Band-Aids. We took them not all the way to the studs. We brought them down to like, let's do a big triage, and this lets us have good enough, right? Not perfect, but good enough tracking and consistency and numbers, and you know, to actually allow some of the more advanced business things like forecasting and some of that. And then you can work toward the full-time solution. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of companies have too. They see this as a very either or situation, right? Where it's either take it to the studs and start over, that's a huge risk, or just keep throwing Band-Aids at it. There are middle grounds for a lot of this stuff. And I think that's another piece that I think cannabis companies should be more open to. You don't have to make big transitions overnight. Like that's where advisors and certain people can come in, where you can make a hard shift, get the ship righted, and then replace that person with a full-time person, right? Like that kind of goes back to the like what cannabis companies need. They need these core high output, like very specific people. And that's that.
Do you think a lot of these issues kind of stem from like an identity crisis, right? Like early on, it was like, oh, it's going to be like the pharma industry. No, it's going to be like the alcohol industry. No, it's going to be like the tobacco industry. Oh, it's just another CPG, right? So like building those different businesses, or those businesses are very different, right? And you couple the fact that it's also an agricultural business that feeds all of those different potential business structures, right? And so a lot of this could stem from that. So like, do you think that that is a root cause of a lot of like these quote unquote band-aids and stuff?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think there's also this like misconception that cannabis is entirely unique, right? Like, yeah, it is, but it also isn't. I think the most appropriate analogy for that is like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to put the best pieces together from different wheels, right? So like my talk on alcohol is typically around opt-in versus opt-out subcultures, right? Like alcohol went through 84 years of post-prohibition changes before we got to the craft beer explosion that we see now, which can drastically change, right? So you can make correlations to like forced vertical integration, regulatory capture, some of the things we saw in like the East Coast reactionary legalization post West Coast, like kind of free for all legalization. But then we overcorrected and we ended up with like an Oklahoma where it was like a total chaos free for all. Likewise, like agricultural processing, I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say it. I think the future of cannabis is going to look like the milk industry. And I think people think that sounds weird until you break it down. But think about how milk is bought, right? If you go to your local store, you are buying from a variety of brands that all got delivered by the same truck that came from the same central processing facility where they pasteurized and did all of the things that require high lift, kind of steady, medium profits. All of the milk came from a variety of craft farms, right? It's not all like large scale industrial agriculture. It's a variety of them. There's big ones, there's small ones, but it becomes this kind of like hourglass shaped world where a variety of business models can funnel into it. And then the high capital requirement, difficult science side kind of gets consolidated. And then they get repackaged, rebranded. Generally speaking, if you go pull out the milk in the grocery store right now, you could pull 3 or 4 different brands that you have access to. They probably all came from the same place. Batteries is another one where it's like that. Like, did you know that there's only 3 battery plants in the entire United States? So like all of your Energizers and they're the exact same battery. They just have different plastic on them, right? Like it's this kind of silly thing. But I think that's where we end up, right? Like that's the direction that cannabis goes if and when we ever get to federal legalization, right? So like that kind of draws to this secondary piece of like, I don't know if I think the MSOs are trying to survive long term. I think a lot of them are trying to, cash grab on forced vertical integration, regulatory capture. Everybody's playing the same game. Like they know what they're doing. And if you look at like the executive comp structures, they have pretty hefty golden parachute clauses and exit strategies and phantom equity and some of those things. I think most of them know federal legalization looks like milk, whether they want to call it milk. They're probably using some much more fancy language and like justifying it in some way that like, their CPG executive, like post alcohol executive world kind of drives to. But I think a lot of these are they're intentionally not set for longevity, right? They're intentionally set for like this current moment. And then kind of like my last point to that is we all act like this is this super established industry or we're really growing. We're still in like the first inning, like probably the first couple of pitches of the first inning, right? Like when international cracks off, when traditional commodification begins, right? Like we eventually become CPG plus culture. And so like that's another piece that like you kind of see the ebb and flow of licensing types or what is successful, right? First it was the MSOs were the first like very successful money grabs. And then it became the asset light brands. The cookies of the world kind of did that. And now the successful business model that you see are the asset light launch brands. So what I mean by that is the distressed assets of the failed people are getting scooped up by large conglomerates who are not branding. They're not doing any of that. They are literally building themselves to be launch vehicles for the asset light brands. So I think that is an interesting shift in dynamics that's kind of at play here as well.
I want to unpack all of that. Definitely want to get to the MO section, but I got to start with the milk, right? Because that one, there's a lot to go through. So Based on that analogy, are you envisioning that specialization is going to be the key separator, meaning like a company that is vertically integrated should look to focus specifically on one part of the supply chain and do it better than anyone else and say, this is where we're going to survive and this is where we're going to excel. So we're going to double down on extraction or we're going to double down on cultivation and prime the protectionary measures from a strategic standpoint of saying, we do this better than anyone else and this is how we know we can continue to fight and survive?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, right? Like, I think specialization becomes the future. So you really have 3 or 4 niches you can niche down on, right? Are you the best at growing it? Are you the best at extracting and manufacturing and packaging it? Or are you the best at selling it? Or are you the best at branding it, right? Like those are kind of the 3 that any traditional industry works in. And one of my favorite examples of this that kind of drives it home is Kraft Foods is the largest seller of cheese in the United States. They own 0 farms. They own very minimal processing. They own a shit ton of packaging facilities and a lot of marketing, right? Like they know what they're doing. So it kind of depends, right? So do you want to be the grocery store that carries the weed? Do you want, which that is even questionable. I think there's a lot to be said. So I heard the CEO of Total Wine was talking about how since they've started carrying hemp beverages, they've seen a 33% increase in foot traffic, right? Those are people like me who don't traditionally consume alcohol very much. They don't ever go into liquor stores. They are seeking readily available access to this that doesn't require the medical card or the jumping through hoops or any of those things. That to me tells me like retail, probably not the niche you should go down, right? Like those are going to start moving into traditional formats at some point, like maybe the GTI Circle K play, like some of those kind of drive toward that mentality. So for me, it's like, can you cultivate good at scale or can you develop a unique craft presence at scale, like to some level of scale? Or, for me, if I had the magic wand and I had $1 bazillion and I was going to buy stuff, I would be buying extraction facilities. It is the most stable aspect of cannabis in a lot of ways because like, kind of like selling picks and shovels, right? Like Gold Rush 1949, who's the only brand we see still floating around, Levi's and Walmart, right? Like that's where they came from. That's kind of their origin story. So like that to me is where it's always going to be. There's always going to be people wanting to process into other things. It's always going to be capital intensive, difficult to do, require specialization. And I think that stays the most stable no matter how much other chaos is going down.
Do you think that also like draws a line in the sand, right? I mean, like hemp beverages is a specific product SKU, right? That humans can control every input from an ingredient perspective, right? Like there's no plant variability. We know the exact concentration of cannabinoids in there. It can be regulated, right? And so it kind of creates this line where that then can allow for the traditional CPG packaging, couple factories across the United States, hub and spoke model, right? This whole thing, right? But if you're, say, a company that grows fire flower, right? Like that whole business strategy, marketing conversation is no longer even on the table, right? Because like the amount of regulatory changes, in my mind at least, like the hill is, it's a cliff that has to be climbed to allow for cannabis to cross state lines at a federal level and a hub and spoke model at this point, right? Like in my mind, there's a lot of dominoes that need to fall at a federal level, right? And like, it's not impossible, but like, it would be wild.
Yeah, it would be crazy. I will say, I don't know that hemp beverages are as cool as we think they are. And it's not a business model thing. I think it's great. I think the issue of scalping in cannabis beverage cans, like hemp beverages, traditional market beverages, is a lot bigger than we want to talk about, right? So if you go out and you look at some of the recent test results or some of the studies, they don't have great shelf lives. So like if the product's moving quickly, you're going to get what it says on the can. It is consistent. But if it sits there for a couple of months, more like a soda does, right? Like it takes a longer time to get it on the shelves. I think we're going to start seeing a real issue there. And it all comes down to the emulsion process in hemp beverages or cannabis beverages in general, right? Traditional cans like this one, right? Like, oh, look, I drink soda. has a plastic liner in it, right? And the difference between like hygroscopic and hydrophobic, right? Between fat soluble, lipid soluble cannabis or other things, terpenes, any of the like volatile organic chemicals and water are very different. So the problem is that in most canned beverages, weed sticks to plastic. It doesn't like to get away from it, whereas the beverage part, right, the liquids and the flavors, the traditional flavor house flavors that you see don't stick to the plastic. So like I personally hope to see a lot more Tetra Pak HD9 beverages where we can control both of those aspects and hopefully prevent the scalping issue if we're going to go down that path.
It's a great point, right? And this beverage category has exploded, and with it has become new manufacturing challenges, and the brands that are having to navigate this are having to do maybe this is a bad comparison, but kind of early cannabis company stuff where it's like they're growing at all costs, whatever we can do, just go, 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 go. And I wonder if they're set up in the same trajectory where they're going to have to figure out how to tighten up the leaks, make some of these improvements, some of these investments. The same thing we're seeing kind of like just like a hill from an industry advancement standpoint.
It's also like a safety though, right? Because like all of those issues now, yeah, they can be solved, but it also means like Coca-Cola just can't like turn their bottling line and their existing infrastructure right into this and like take market share. So like there is some safety with that problem as well.
They've probably talked about it.
If you solve it.
You know who uses Tetra Paks all the time? The milk industry.
So,
watch out, Kroger.
The thing that we're angling now, like Coca-Cola's not coming, milk industry is coming.
Yeah,
I love it.
TGV plant in Orlando is coming for your jobs.
They're gonna be like, who are these guys? You're like, these are the milk boys.
Yeah, the milk guys are here.
So I want to go back to the Total Wines thing. Like hearing him speak about that, he doesn't want that ever to stop. If they're getting an increase in foot traffic, this is just the beginning of what he envisions as like a future rollout. And the challenge now becomes like the genie's out, and these guys are big players, and they're going to want more access, more brands, more distribution. And now you're inviting the big fish to come, right? Big alcohol is like, this is the part of the industry we want. And I wonder how that works with the cannabis industry, because it eventually has to get all molded together in some capacity, different categories, but how that all works together. And I wonder if the big players then go, okay, this is how we foresee it to go, and they now start lobbying on behalf of the industry. I have no idea. And just trying to think. Yeah, just trying to think through it in real time. It is so complicated and so many moving pieces. There's so many challenges, and it's just endless setups. And it's kind of like ride the wave while you can, figure out how you go, and then put the piece of the puzzle back together.
So I think there's a couple of interesting companies that have jumped into cannabis for a test run, right? Like Pabst Labs exists, Mary Jones Soda, a couple of the medium to large, like established brands have tried to play in it. But if I was the big kids, right, like the Coca-Colas and Pepsis or the Nestle's of the world, I would be looking for somebody who's talking about the whole unsustainable vertical integration model. Because if you're smart, they have the wherewithal to let those shit fall apart, right? Like push for federal legalization, let them fall apart, scoop up their shit for pennies on the dollar, and then make your entrance because you have the marketing push, you have the whole rail system to develop it, and maybe license a couple of the larger brands, right? So like that's a really interesting aspect that I don't know if I see enough people planning for. Because if I were a Coca-Cola executive, I wouldn't be looking to buy the MSOs like most of the MSOs think they would, right? And when I say MSO, I don't mean just like general multi-state operators, not even really tier 2 MSOs. I mean like the large pubcos. They would not be my target at all, right? Like I would be buying the distressed assets. I would wait for them to fall apart upon federal legalization. I think a good aspect of that would be like Trulieve and Curaleaf's failed play to come out west, right? Like they kind of got too big for their britches. Like I appreciate what they've done in East Coast cannabis, but they got a little too big for their britches and they tried to go play in a very different horizontal market and they got pushed out, right? They had to eventually cut their losses. And I don't know that I see the posturing from them that one would think from learning from that mistake, right? They more just licked their wounds and came back to there where everybody's playing in the forced vertical integration regulatory capture model, right? And like that to me, if I were, the Coca-Cola executive would be a huge sign of the times to come. I would say, okay, I'll just let you guys sit there for a little bit because they don't measure life in the same time frames we do, right? Like the big companies, 5 years for them, meh, whatever. Like, let it just fall apart.
It's better, right? And from their standpoint, they're not thinking 5 years. They're thinking 50, 100, 200 years down the road because their expansion to new revenue streams, they recognize it takes capital in order to invest in these different areas. And sometimes that means long-term investments for long-term gain.
I also think it's important to note that like the entire regulated cannabis industry is like a 1 month on the balance sheet for like Wells Fargo and Bank of America and Chase Citibank, BlackRock, Vanguard, like the large players. Our whole industry is a blip on their stock portfolio. So like, we act like we're big and bad, but that's where I kind of get to like the international cannabis play, I think gets very interesting, right? Somebody I know once told me that cannabis doesn't really start until the summer of 2028. And I was kind of like, what the hell are you talking about? And he goes, dude, that's the Olympics come to LA, right? The international community is going to see what a society that has weed looks like up in their face, right? Like imagine what they start learning from that. And if you take that with some of the like the European model stuff that's kind of popping off, Thailand, a couple of the others, like we don't even start, right? Like the second inning starts in the summer of 2028. And that's where the big money is. Because like the United States, Canada, even combined, right? Like we're 400 million people, something like that. Okay, that's a third of India. Right? That's a third of China. That's nothing. It's not even like the entire population of the United States could fit in the Buenos Aires, Brazil metro area, right? Like we're not like, I don't think we're thinking big enough yet. And by we, I mean like most cannabis players. But it's also too early to jump into that in a lot of ways.
From an infrastructure standpoint, then like if you're a company, how do you both balance building a factory that's like, hey, I only have this small state to supply, but also Brett says like I need to be prepared to sell to billions of people, right? Like you can't build like
how do I prepare to be the milkman?
I would do that, right? Like you got to niche down and you got to be the number one player in your market and then fix the next one and then pick the next one. But that's kind of why I chose B2B, right? I want to be farther up the value stream so you can play with that, right? Like terpene suppliers, extraction equipment companies, banking software, like those are all of the things that I like to play in, any of that kind of B2B environment stuff, because then you're prepared for it, right? It doesn't matter where the mole pops up, right? We can target it with a very specific go-to-market strategy applied to that fits into the larger go-to-market bubble, right? So like that's again where my world comes in. But like if we're talking cannabis companies that are B2C, you got to own one market and one niche, and then either go the asset light play where you're like planning on licensing, looking for those launch ramps. Like these guys are one of my all-time favorites. Not a client, not affiliated.
You want to read it out loud for it's bad audio.
Fish Whistle Cannabis. So like for them, right? Like niche down. They picked one thing. Like, do you guys know what a fish whistle is? It's a joint. It's what fishing people call a joint, right? Start up the fish whistle. You get on your boat, you smoke the joint. They picked one niche, right? Like dudes that like fishing and outdoor shit. It looks like an outdoor company hat. Like it does all of the things it's supposed to do. Like niche down. Own that one niche. And then you can forever live, right? Like if you look at all the different like traditional consumer packaged goods, that's what happens, right? Like there's the like soccer mom lipstick, and then there's the like party girl lipstick, and there's the this brand, niche, and this niche, and this niche, and it kind of goes into like basic marketing theory at that point, or any business like go to market strategy theory of like pick a unique differentiator in a niche, own the shit out of it, and grow sustainably with measuring it one step at a time. You either move to the next slightly larger niche or the next slightly larger market.
That makes total sense from like a B2C standpoint. But B2B, exactly like you were saying, how do the companies who are handling some of those technology elements, how do they separate themselves and then develop the trust necessary in order to get the industry, who's already very skeptical, to start applying some of these other concepts to their work when they have the ego involved, they're dealing with all these fires, they're trying to figure out who they are, and they're trying to set themselves up for future milk success?
I think number one is problem first language, right? Like you have to address people where they are, right? So one of my favorite like marketing languages is we want to talk about the solution to their itch, not our scratch. Right? It sounds a little silly and it's a little kitschy, but like it's the truth, right? Like cannabis companies, whether they're a B2C cannabis company or a B2B cannabis company, they all kind of have the same base issues. Which of those issues are you solving, right? Which part of that problem, that set of problems are you solving? And then how do I make your life better? Right. And that's kind of the long and short of it. I think most cannabis companies will give you the time of day if you're truly talking about their problems. And then it comes down to like, did you measure it properly? Did you follow up enough? Did you convince them of it? So like if we're going into like basic sales theory, I think a lot of B2B cannabis companies lack that strong sense of a close, right? Like that strong sense of like, one of my favorite things to talk about is like, well, I've kind of made the joke about it a little bit, but like if I had a magic wand, right? Like if I had a magic wand, what would the perfect solution for you look like? Great. Let me tell you how ours stacks up to your perfect. We're 80% there. What if I could do this, right? Like what would it take to earn your business today? Because just the matter is like new startups happen all the time and they disrupt easily. And most of them are either super fucking novel or they crush follow up.
Do you see tons of opportunity still, recognizing we're early in the first?
Yeah. I think there's an innumerable amount of opportunity to either service new consumers on the B2C side or to service new cannabis companies. So like kind of going back to the analogy of the gold rush, right? Like 9 out of 10 people that were going out there were going to fail. They were never going to get the gold, right? They were never going to do anything. Every single one of them needed picks and shovels and flashlights and Levi's jeans to protect themselves and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is never going to be a shortage of people trying to get into cannabis. So as long as you can service those, like you're golden. Just like there's never going to be a shortage of people who want to try weed for the first time in some variety of format. Like one of the most novel weed products I can think of, weed inhalers. Have you guys seen those? The inhalers? I am the target market for that. I want to walk around Disney World like I have the fucking worst asthma on the planet. Yeah, this is great, right? Like I think that's such a novel concept, like stuff like that, right? It kind of goes back to what we very, very, very early started on, right? Like we buy the excuses, we buy the BS. Like I think innovation and novelty and solving problems is just beginning.
I love that, right? Because the industry is loaded and it's super, super hard, but hard is opportunities, right? And if you can figure out the niche and the value proposition that fits that pain point, you've solved a big problem, which the industry has endless amounts, which provide for entrepreneurs to come in. So is there a few areas for the entrepreneurs that are listening and be like, okay, if you wanted to come in the industry or you're looking to start a different idea, here's 3 different ones that I see the biggest problems that most people face?
Are we talking B2B or B2C?
First one that came to mind.
Okay, so B2B, I think number one is helping businesses track their business better. And I don't mean like the traditional point of sale stuff. And I don't mean like the track and trace stuff. I mean actually understanding like the loyalty programs in a more traditional way. I love a lot of that stuff that exists in cannabis. But let's be very real here. That software was purpose built for cannabis. And we're at a place now where can we take what the big kids do and apply it here? I think that's huge in B2B land. For B2C land, I think it kind of comes down to finding a niche that isn't represented, right? We still kind of live in this world where like men 18 to 45 are the primary market. And then the only other 2 you hear about are like geriatrics and soccer moms. I think like these guys, there is an innumerable amount of niches that exist, right? Like where's the brand for sneakerheads? Where's the brand for dudes who love video games? Where's the brand for insert this thing here, right? So like the beauty of cannabis is that it is not necessarily tied to any given culture or movement or thing. It is amorphous, which kind of brings me to like the whole cannabis as a concept, not as a product. but as like a talking point or a societal concept, is on a huge shift, right? So like we used to be what's called an opt-in subculture. And basically what that means is I have to overcome social stigma to choose to be a part of it. Like skateboarding, right? Like, or punk rock, or all kinds of things where it's like, you don't want to do that, right? All the things your mom told you not to do that you decided to do anyways, like being an emo kid when I was in high school, like those are opt-in subcultures. We are now moving toward what we are hoping becomes an opt-out subculture. So something like being an iPhone user or consuming alcohol at bars if you're in your 20s or 30s, where I have to intentionally opt out of this known subculture that exists, right? Because nobody behaves the way they do in a bar all the time, but that's how you behave when you go there, right? Cannabis is in a very weird spot culturally with that, where it depends on where you are, who you are, how you're interacting, right? So like, depends on your social circle. Sometimes you're the fucking weirdo if you don't smoke weed. And they're like, ew. Flip that in other social circles or other, regions of the country or the world. Oh, that's the devil's lettuce. This is terrible, right? And I don't think we as a movement, right, or we as a community do a great job of acknowledging the variety that exists in the opinions on cannabis, right? Like we kind of look for these positive signals of like, ooh, like 92% of Americans support some level of cannabis legalization. Great. But like 85% of those don't agree on how or what, right? There are tons of people who want legal cannabis, but like, I don't want to fucking smell it every time I walk down the street, or like something, and that's not me. Like, I don't care. But like, you kind of get where I'm going with that. Like, there's such a variety in what it means to be a cannabis consumer that like you can pair almost any demographic, psychographic interest group with a form factor of weed and own that niche.
Is a lot of that like understanding that true consumer and then meeting them where they are?
Yeah. I mean, that's business 101, B2B or B2C. It's like understand the niche, understand the problem, meet them where they are. Right. So like, one of my favorite business quotes was that guy, Rob McPherson, that used to, he basically retired from Bacardi and then became this like big meanie head on LinkedIn, where he was like telling cannabis everything they did wrong. The smartest thing he ever said, and I to this day think it is brilliant, was every business has one purpose: to delight your customer. How do you delight your customer? Sell them something they want at the price they want in the location they want, and make sure it's the same every time. That is business 101.
What'd you say, Kellen?
I said simple.
It's simple, not easy, right?
I mean,
simple, not easy.
That's the beautiful part about business, right? Is some of the core aspects of it are simple, right? To run a successful business, you need to make more than it costs you to run the business. You need to track your numbers. You need to be consistent with your product. You need to be understanding your consumers. And I think that is part of the guidance of like where cannabis has the opportunities to improve, is that the growth has been the sole focus. And now it's like, all right, let's lock it down. Let's figure out where we are and let's specialize in those areas, whether that's consumer demographics, that's honoring B2C. The milk thing is super fascinating. I want to go back to that one last time because like it's still percolating in my brain. So if I'm hearing this and I'm a B2C customer or like I'm a brand, what can I do to position myself for if the industry moves towards the milk?
Same answer. Niche down, right? Find your niche and own the shit out of it, right? It's kind of what we were talking about in the green room before we started this, right? Like, what do you do? Make it obvious what I do, who I do it for, and why I do it, right? Like, what is the message we want to convey? Like, most of us don't really think about what we participate in the social contract of branding, right? Like, oh, I wear insert brand t-shirt here. We fall for that kind of marketing all the time. Great example. This looks like a nothing shirt, right? Absolutely nothing shirt. This is a brand called True Classic. And I bought in hard to the marketing where they were like, hey, chubby guys, it'll make your man boobs look smaller. Like, it'll make you look svelte or whatever. And I'm like, that's exactly what I need. I need a basic t-shirt that makes me look slimmer than I am. Like, I want that. So like, it's that simple, right? Like, nobody thinks I want to own the t-shirt game. Like, nobody thinks like that. Like, same thing with like shoes. A great example of that, like, what is it? Hoka or whatever. Like, they started with a very specific niche group and they kind of grew it. The same thing applies to cannabis, right? Like, become what people think of that signals some level of status. And it doesn't have to be like high fashion status, right? But like, we all subtly communicate with like the way we wear our hat, the pants we wear, the shirts we wear, the things we hold, the car we drive, right? Like each one of those things is a subtle social signal amongst the social contract of the country, right? Or the world. Pick one and become that thing. Insert X interest with cannabis, right? Like that's how you win. Because eventually, if the big guys, right, the big guys we were talking about earlier come knocking, they're going to go brand house, not house, or they're going to go house of brands, not brand house, right? So like brand house being what like Disney does, where it's like Disney Pixar, Disney Star Wars, Disney Marvel, Disney, everything branded Disney, versus what something like Kraft Foods or Nestle or some of these larger conglomerates do, where you don't even realize the totally milk replacement drink is made by the same guy who's making the cookies you're eating with it, is made by the same people who made the plate it's sitting on, where they're capturing different aspects of the value. So if you're a B2C company and you're planning for this inevitable future, become that thing that they need to have, right? Like I need to scoop this one up to attract this niche for my variety of things, because eventually people who think broadly like that, who are looking at the whole pie, are going to want to capture as much of the total addressable market as possible, right? So like niching down allows you to own one small lane and become one piece of the larger pie when that eventually comes. And it's also guaranteed cash flow, right? Yes, you're giving up a certain amount of total addressable market, but you're going deep, not wide, right? And I think that's a problem a lot of cannabis companies have, B2C cannabis companies. They want to go very wide, right? They want to capture the total addressable market, mostly because I think they think that's how they get more money and investment, right? I think it's the kind of this misnomer or misconception within the broader like VC private equity world, but like going deep is amazing, right? If you can capture 60 or 80% of market share, even in a single market, and then move to either the next little niche, right? Some adjacent niche, right? Like fishing people and hunting people overlap. So now that I've crushed being the fishing and weed brand, how do I become the hunting and weed brand? Or how do I become the cowboys and weed brand? Or how do I think you guys kind of get where I'm going with that. Like that's like to me the answer.
Yeah, that's the way to describe it. And the first thing I thought about was wild with their edibles moving to the beverage concept is, right, they've got the trust of the consumer, they've got the brand recognition, and then you walk in and you're like, okay, well, there's a bunch of brands I don't know, but I know this one. And I wonder from a TAM standpoint, that's just a sexy metric, right? And the bigger that number is, the more enticing it is for those investors. But you're right, like having a better understanding of like customer acquisition costs and then figuring out how do you increase that lifetime spend for those customers you spend so much money to acquire, because having them repeat is maybe more important than getting them the first time, because it depends on how you're moving forward. So we're gonna have to hard pivot here. 1 year from now, what has changed?
In cannabis?
Yeah.
Ooh, I think we're going to be hopefully mostly past the hemp versus cannabis conversation. And we're kind of more into we're one larger movement and we kind of have to work together. I mean, the writing's on the wall, right? Lots of the big players are starting to jump into the HD9 beverage space or the like gas station play. If I had to go pie in the sky, I hope we get like safer banking and some level of access there. I just saw 2 or 3 days ago the first kind of crack at a bipartisan bill coming out. I think it's like Nancy Mace and Ilhan Omar, despite their like hatred of each other, obviously in the public eye, have both agreed that there's this one specific rule that the National Drug Council advisor to the president is not allowed to take a stance on Schedule 1 drugs. And the person who is currently that likes weed. They are pro cannabis, but they're not allowed to talk about it now that they have that job. And there's some like funding things. It's kind of the reverse of like the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment, where like, they're not allowed to spend money researching a Schedule 1 drug. So this kind of small niche coalition of politicians is really pushing that, because at the very end of the day, like we could theoretically have legal weed without Congress, without any of that bullshit. Like it could come from FDA, some of those groups, and like, love him or hate him, Bobby Kennedy Jr. has by and large been pro cannabis as well, but also legally prevented from really talking about it in a measurable way right now outside of the officially sanctioned FDA discovery process with the DEA and all of those other people. So like I don't think it gets us that overnight, right? It's not like a magic wand, like, ta-da! Like, it's legal, but it would be really great if we could actually have candid conversations with the politicians that have real power. And that little tiny blip in the news has given me hope for that.
I love it. Most impactful book.
Ooh, for me personally, it's venture deals. So two venture capitalists and their lawyer decided to give everybody the playbook of how they do it. I just think it very interesting how the money aspect impacts the way people look at business. If it's not that, then it's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Because, like, who doesn't love it? That or what is it? Alex Hormozzi's $100 million leads, I think, is also great. Like, how to make strangers want to buy your shit or whatever it's called. Like, that's another one.
Those are all great examples. Dream smoking session, 3 people dead or alive.
Oh, no. I have no idea. I don't really like to smoke with other people in like any sort of in-depth environment like that. I like it as like a by myself thing or like a social environment thing. But I guess if I had to pick, I think it would be really interesting to sit down with Buzz Aldrin, Clint Eastwood, who's my third. I don't know if I have a third. I would really just like to smoke weed with them. I guess if we had to do it, I would want to talk to Seth Rogen just because he's like kind of one of the lesser weed gods.
It's a great trio.
And it would be a really weird conversation.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Seth Rogen and like Clint Eastwood would just start arguing, and me and Buzz Aldrin would be like, so when do we get to talk about aliens? Right? Like,
let's skip this. Let's get right to the aliens.
Yeah, like,
Would you really go to the moon?
Oh, that got to be your first question, right?
That would be fighting words to him, probably.
What do you think? I'm a liar?
I like when people talk about that, like, oh, the moon landing's fake. I like taking it and messing with people and be like, oh, you think the moon's real? Just totally throw people's life off.
Last question. What question do you wish more people asked you?
Honestly, I wish more people asked me about what the experience of being an autistic professional that is successful is like. I'm very fortunate because I have what's called hyperverbal autism, so I come off very normal. It doesn't mean my base processing isn't much more akin to the way most people that you would more regularly look at. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where, like, in a lot of ways, I appreciate that most people don't make that an aspect. They just treat me like a normal person. But I do wish, on some degree, that was an aspect of conversation, that people truly understood that, like, what you see is not necessarily what's happening inside.
I love it. That's a great way to end. So, Brett, for our listeners, they want to get in touch. They want to learn more. Where can they find you?
LinkedIn! I talk shit there every day. Almost every day. Usually something that people don't want to talk about or some kind of hot take or angry thing. That's the easiest way, man. Drop a comment, shoot me a DM. I am there all the time.
Love it. We'll link it up in the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys.